Hello everyone and welcome to iOpenTCGs, the channel where I used to open TCGs and now I just make PowerPoint discussion videos. And today we have another discussion video about Star Wars Unlimited, although it could be about pretty much any game on the market right now. Specifically, this is a response to some of the comments in my last video. If you haven't watched that last video, I suggest you do, but I'm going to recap it here for you really quickly. So to catch you up, last video I talked about how FFG will need to massively cut the supply of Star Wars Unlimited Set 4 because of three reasons. Number one, FFG decided to increase the legendary hit rate in Set 4. This will result in around 28% more of a specific legendary. So that of course means there's going to be more legendaries on the market. It's going to push down the price. Number two, they're going to introduce Carbonite boxes or the collector boxes, which will increase the supply of all the cards, but specifically showcases, and that will create a lot of downward pressure, again, on the EV of a regular box and the market as a whole. And number three, Star Wars Set 3 was already massively oversupplied to begin with. So with those three factors happening at the same time, my hope was that, of course, they will cut the supply for Set 4. I don't think they will to a significant degree. We'll find out in a second. But I also talked about in that video how TCGs require players, collectors, and stores to be happy and to function properly. Now, that was at the very end of the video. I don't think most people watch that part. And I really want to make this video about this point. All right. So this is going to be a long one. Last time I made a video like this, I don't think I explained myself properly. And I found that a lot of people in the comments didn't understand the point that I was making. So this one might be a long one, strap in, but I hope you take it as an educational tool of the current TCG market and learn more about where I'm coming from. Now, the most popular response to my last video is capsulated in this comment. Now, I'm not driving any hate to this person. I think this is a legitimate thing I've seen so many places on Facebook, on Discord, all over the place. All right. It's the most upvoted comment on my video, and it reads as follows. More copies of a card driving value down does happen, but the positive effects of getting people to play and getting people to open packs far outweigh the negatives of card population. So this is something I hear all the time. Cheap means more people. Cheap is good. So many more people are going to come in. Cheap, good, cheap, good, cheap, good. I don't know how to say this other than this is wrong. Let me explain. So it's a positive, right? Now there are positives to having cheaper cards. My point was never that there are no positives. My point is that there are more negatives than there are positives. All right. So what are these positives? Well, it will bring in a lot of new players because it's cheap. That does happen, right? When singles are cheaps, when competitive decks are cheaps, when the entry point is cheap, a lot of players will check out the game that probably normally wouldn't, right? TCGs are generally a very expensive hobby. So the cheaper that you can make it, the better it is to a certain degree. Another positive is that maybe supply will dwindle because you have new people coming in. They're going to buy more boxes. They might open more boxes. That's how you get rid of some of the supply, right? You create more demand, new players. Another positive is that cheap singles means cheap competitive decks. I just mentioned this, but one of the big problems in a lot of other games is that they have very expensive competitive decks. So it's very hard for a new person to join and do something like that, right? Flesh and Blood's a great example. The other game that I open a lot of, very expensive game, but it has a lot of other positives and other negatives as well associated with that. Now, there may be more. I try to ask in the comments if there were, if that specific person had any other positives they want to insert. Let me know in the comments all the other positives that you think, because there are more positives. All right. Now, the real question, though, that I'm positing for this discussion is if these positives double or triple or quadruple the player base, then maybe you would be right, right? Because the claim was that the cheap prices far outweigh the negatives. But the problem is that doubling, tripling, quadrupling the player base because of this will never happen because TCGs are not just about players. It never has been, it never will be, despite so many Star Wars Unlimited fans thinking that's how it is. Every action has a positive and a negative impact, And very, very often, players only think about the positives for players. They don't think about the negatives for collectors or stores or even other players. They only care about the specific type of player they are, which oftentimes on Discord, on Facebook, on Reddit, it is just people who want the cheapest card possible to play the game as cheaply as they can, right? So what are the negatives, right? What are the negatives of having too much supply on the market, right? Again, that leads to very cheap box prices, very cheap singles as well. What are the negatives? Well, stores do not want to carry the game in the future if they can't make any money. 2, collectors don't want to collect if the game doesn't have that much value. And 3, box openers don't want to open boxes because the EV just doesn't make sense. Now, I'm going to talk about all 3 of these things in more detail in a second. But to me, those are the positives of oversupply. These are the negatives of oversupply. But which ones really matter more? All right. I think you know what I think, but let's see if I can convince you. All right. So let's first talk about stores. Stores are the forgotten stepchild of the TCG space. People have an LGS, they go to the LGS, but most people don't give a fuck about stores. And the reason you know this is because nobody, unless it's a store chiming up in the comment section, nobody thinks about the negatives that happen to stores. But what's important is that stores are an integral part of a TCG. I already know you're typing out the comment, okay? I already know someone's typing out because it happens every video, okay? What I'm saying is the market isn't binary, right? The options are not cheap or expensive. Those are not the 2 options. There's a giant spectrum between too cheap and too expensive with a million stops in between, right? Boxes can be too cheap and that causes issues. Boxes can be too expensive, like set 1, that can cause other issues. So when I say, oh, it's too cheap right now, I am not advocating for everything to be very expensive, all right? I know the internet likes to make those arguments, those binary things. That is not what I'm saying. So this is just kind of an example of what I'm talking about. In the middle, we have MSRP, which is the healthiest, I think, for a TCG is to maintain somewhere around MSRP. You got ultra cheap boxes on the left, which is super unhealthy. And you have insane box prices like Pokemon right now, which is also super, super unhealthy as well, right? Now in Star Wars, we are here. We are very, very, very close, if not already there, at ultra cheap boxes. Now, why? The reason is because 2 out of the 3 sets pretty much don't make stores much money, if money at all. So here's the reality for a lot of stores that have supported Star Wars since its release. This is kind of an important question for me. Doesn't matter too much, but I don't think most Star Wars Unlimited players know what the MSRP of a Star Wars box is, all right? So without Googling right now, either think of it, type it in the comments, and edit it later. I don't know. But what do you think is the MSRP? Now remember, Asmodee, FFG is the one that determines the MSRP. The distro cost, the price that stores have to pay for a box, those are all based off of the MSRP that Asmodee chooses, right? They can choose a more expensive box. They can choose a less expensive box and make less money, right? They are in charge of this. So what do you think a Star Wars MSRP box is? Drum roll, please. It is $120 per box. That is the price that Asmodee has set themselves as the target, the MSRP. In theory, that's what you want to charge, $120 per box. All right. Now, again, a lot of players don't know this, but do you know how much stores pay for a box? Because I have heard all sorts of absolutely insane numbers from people. So MSRP is $120 per box. That's how much. That's Asmodee saying, hey, stores, when you buy my product, we hope you can sell it for $120. But you got to pay FFG first. All right, drum roll. Think of your answer. All right, the answer is $60 to $70 a box. Now, this does have a significant range because it depends which distro you work with. It depends how many boxes you buy, right? Sometimes if you buy more boxes or spend more with Asmodee, you get some discounts later on. But generally, it's around $60 to $70 a box. I have talked to stores that get charged around $75 per box, things like that. But generally, let's just say $60 to $70, maybe $65 a box is how much they store. Well, you look at that and you're like, wow, that's actually a lot of profit built in that a store could make. Well, what's the problem right now? Well, the problem right now is that set 3 on release day on TCG Player was $75. All right. Now, after fees and shipping, that is around $60 a box, which is either equal to or less money than what stores are paying for their boxes. That is on release day. Now, you might be thinking, well, that's TCG Player. It's got fees, all of that stuff. When your store sells it locally, it's different. And you're right. Unfortunately, a lot of stores compete with the general TCG Player market, right? Same with eBay as well. So it's hard to charge $100 per box or $120 per box when somebody can go on TCG Player and buy it for $60, $65. That's why TCG price is pretty important as well. So that means that since release day for set 3, there are stores that probably didn't make any money on set 3. And again, it's not binary, right? The other world where boxes are like set 1 and they're really expensive, like $200, $250, that's also not good. My goal, my dream, I think the dream for most stores and TCGs is for boxes to be around MSRP, maybe plus 10%, maybe minus 10%, maybe you get a little bit of a deal when you go to a big online store. That's fine, right? If the box costs $100, $110, $95, okay. But $75 on the day of release is messed up. And I really don't think players understand that. Now, do stores really even matter, right? You're probably thinking, I don't care. How many stores are stores, right? A lot of them are lazy. Some of them suck, right? My LGS sucks. I don't even have one near me, right? Do stores really even matter? Well, unfortunately, they do matter. They are a very important part of the TCG ecosystem. They take on, this is very important, they take on a lot of the financial risk off of FFG in the hopes of profits, right? Because when FFG sells a box to either distro or directly to a store, they make a set amount of money, right? They make $60 a box, let's say. So if the market price of the box goes up to $200, they don't get any part of that, right? If the market price goes down to $20, they already sold their boxes for $60. Stores are absorbing a lot of the financial risk from TCGs when they buy them. They want to make some money, right? Now, a lot of times stores are damned if they do, damned if they don't, right? They either need to, if the market price is really low, they need to match the market price or else they get called idiots, right? Like I see all the time, people will be like, oh, my store wants $120 for set 1 or set 2 or set 3. And it's like, that's the deal they made, right? Which is, I want to sell the box for MSRP, but I can't, but I look like an ass because the market is $60. Whereas the opposite is also true, right? If the market price is now $300 and a store marks up their boxes to $300, suddenly they're the enemy, right? Because they're scalpers, right? Things like that. They're damned if they do, damned if they don't. And for the most part, the person at blame is FFG, the people that control the supply, right? You print too little, scalpers come out the woodwork. You print too much, market price tanks. They are also advertisers of your game by running events, having cards available to buy, and to have a place for new players to discover the game. That's pretty important. And they often do a lot of the legwork to keep a community going. Again, I see comments all the time. They're like, well, stores should do this and do this and do this. And stores are required to do all of this legwork for what? $5 in profit per box? $10? Negative $5 in profit? Like, if you want a store, right, at your Asmodee, your FFG, if you want a store to do all of this legwork for you, to take some financial risk off of you, you want to provide a product where they can make money. And that is the most important part. That is what pisses off stores and will have insane ramifications in the future, especially if set 4 is also very bad. Lastly, stores also run competitive events. A lot of TCG companies use stores as an outlet to run a lot of these competitive events with little input from themselves. Stores matter. Now, if all the product was sold directly on Amazon or directly through FFG's website, the impact of stores would be a lot less, but the communal aspect is very, very important for TCGs, especially for games without an official online client. So again, I know I'm talking a lot in this video, but what I'm trying to hit home here is that stores matter a lot. And if stores can't make money, why would they run your game, right? They can run Magic, which is blowing up again. They can run Pokemon, which is crazily blowing up right now. They can run Yu-Gi-Oh!, Lorcana, One Piece, all blowing up right now. Well, Lorcana settling down a little bit, but One Piece still blowing up, right? Flesh and Blood, there's a lot of other games that they can run, buy, play, and make more money. That is why the market price is very important for TCGs. Let's move on to the other pillar of a TCG, the collector. Arguably, as I'm going to make here as I argue this, the most important part, all right, of a TCG. Now, why are they the most important part? Because there are entire industries that are 100% carried by collectors. Which ones? The big ones. Sports cards, pop figure. I mean, anything that's not a game, that is purely collectors, multi-billion-dollar industries carried by collectors, right? That is how important collectors are and how meaningful their support is to a product. Now, in gaming terms, collectors are the whales. Collectors are where the majority of revenue comes from, both directly and passively. For example, collectors generally spend a lot more per person than these regular players that you're bringing in that only care about the cheapest price possible and the cheapest boxes possible, right? One collector is worth many, many, many of those people monetarily. Number two, collectors are often mass box openers. Some of them open 2, 3, 4, 10, 20 cases. I've seen it happen. Also, collectors inject EV into boxes because they're the ones buying non-base rarity cards. Now, there are some players that do this too. Obviously, it's not binary. You're not just a player or just a collector. There is a lot of mix between. Please don't write me a comment that says, I'm a player, but I also collect. I understand that. All right. But generally, this is how important collectors are to an industry, right? Now, there are collectors that collect just for the love of collecting, right? They don't care about value. They love Star Wars. They just want Star Wars stuff. That definitely does happen. But that is not the motivating factor for most collectors. Most people, when they collect something, they still want that collection to be worth something one day, or they think it'll be worth something one day, right? Perceived value and longevity is needed to court collectors, not rock bottom prices. Again, why does this matter? Because even if you bring in a lot of players, all of these rock bottom price players, right? And it doubles and it triples. If you don't bring in collectors, that's a big, big, big problem. And again, FFG is working on collector boxes. I have an entire collector box video if you really want to see that one. Personally, I don't think it is set up properly to really bring in collectors, but we'll have to see exactly how it turns out in a couple of weeks. So we talked about stores that are negatively affected by oversupply. We talked about collectors that are negatively affected. But let's talk about players again. All right. I understand players are important. It's a game. It's not sports cards. You need players to play the game. Of course. But you also need collectors in stores as well. That is my point. Okay? Any pros you preach for players, you must also think of the cons for collectors and stores. Time and time again, on all the channels, it is always like, I want cheap cards, I want cheap cards, I want cheap cards, me. Great. I understand. You are a part of the ecosystem. We need you. But you also need collectors and stores. Now, how do I know that just players can't sustain a game in the long term? Well, that's because, if you didn't know, FFG has already tried making card games without collectors. They call them living card games. Now, living card games were non-randomized card sets. So if you wanted to buy a box of the new set, you got all the cards. There's no randomization. There's no chases. There's no foils. There's nothing special there. You just get all the cards as dirt cheap as possible at the price, of course, that they decide to to charge you. Now, here's a list of all the competitive LCGs FFG has tried making. You have Call of Cthulhu, the card game, Game of Thrones, the card game, Warhammer Invasion, Android Netrunner, shout outs, my favorite game of all time, Star Wars, the card game, Warhammer 40K Conquest, Legends of the Five Rings, the card game. These were all competitive LCGs that Fantasy Flight has made. And guess how many are still alive to this day? None of them. Now, there are cooperative LCGs that are currently still going and doing very well. Marvel Champions, Arkham Horror LCG. Like, cooperative LCGs make a lot of sense because those are effectively just kind of board games, right? But a competitive game where it's only players, none of them are still alive. Now, the longest running competitive LCG was for 6 years, and that was Netrunner and Star Wars the card game. Those are the two longest running LCGs. Now, the real problem with LCGs is not the game design. As I just said, Netrunner is amazing. Probably my favorite design card game of all time. It is an absolute tour de force. So freaking fun and amazing. The gameplay was on point. The problem is that people in general prefer randomized cards. Why? Because value is important to even players. All right? It's part of what gives a card game that extra oomph, extra eyeballs, extra, the chase is very important. You know, all of that is important. It is not just about the players. Okay? Now, there are a lot of other issues with LCGs. It wasn't just the fact that it didn't make the companies as much money as possible, right? There are a lot of other reasons that LCGs ultimately shut down. But the reason I bring up LCGs is that I often hear people say, players is what is important to a game. They have tried that. That is the literal reason why LCGs exist, is because they heard people keep saying that if you make it as cheap as possible and the game as good as possible, it's going to be a big thing. And a lot of these LCGs were medium things, right? Maybe medium small things, right? But I would bet that Asmodee made more money in 1 year selling Star Wars Unlimited than every single LCG put together. Because the chase, it's about the chase. Whether or not players agree, the chase matters a lot. Now, here's the thing. I purposely front-loaded this because I knew most people wouldn't make it to the end. And I really wanted to give the huge shout out to stores, to collectors. That is really important to understand that a TCG requires more than just players. But here's the real counter argument, all right? Set 2 has been $80 or less for 4 months. Set 3, we just talked about, since the day of release, has been $75 or less on TCG Player. They reprinted Set 1 3 months ago, so it's also easily available now. This right now, in the last 3 months, has been the easiest and cheapest way to get into the game. 2/3 of the box don't make stores any money. All the other cons we talked about have happened, but it is a fact that in the last 3 months, it is the cheapest, easiest way to get into the game. So where are all the new players? Where are all the new players that are coming from all of these cheap things? Now, I know that there are other issues that prevent new players from coming in. Maybe it's that Set 3 just wasn't very good. Maybe it's that rotation scared some of them away. Maybe it was winter time and people are not spending much money and being with family and holidays and things like that. I totally understand. But the original take, all right, the original take is that if the box prices are cheap, the supply is really heavy, new players are going to come in. Where are all the new players? To help answer that question, I tried something. I went on Facebook and I tried to get some data. All right. So on the Star Wars Unlimited biggest Facebook group, I made a poll. Maybe you saw it. All right. And it asked the following: compared to the first 3 months of Set 1, the number of players in my local communities weeklies have increased, decreased, things like that. The reason I asked for this is because my local experience is probably very different than yours. I see a lot of people that say, well, at my store, it's growing. congratulations. That's awesome. There are other experiences and other perspectives in this world. So the way that I can get that, the only way that I can, is to just ask the broadest amount of people that I could, which is what I did on Facebook, right? The purpose is I'm trying to see if there's been growth, right? Sunset One, has there been growth? Now, here are the results. With 770 votes, which is quite a lot of people to chime in. So I broke it into a lot of different categories, right? We have game is effectively dead. My community has gone down 80% or more. There's decreased significantly, minus 40% and minus 80%. I try to break it down to get a better sense of what's going on. To sum it up, around 28% of communities stayed around the same, which is pretty good. 31% of the communities had increased players. Now, most of that was between 5 to 20%, and then there were some from 20% to 40%, but growth is growth. That's great. That makes sense because some communities do very well, which causes more people to come in and play, and they kind of compound on each other, right? Now, the opposite is also true, which is when a community starts to die, it starts to die very quickly, right? And that is why you get more decreased significantly versus game is dead than the opposite, right? Where it stands, 41% of communities said they have a decrease in players. So my question again is, where are all these new players from the cheat boxes? Another point that is very important is if supply is ever fixed, which it will be, you hope, right? We can't have rock bottom prices forever. That just doesn't make sense, again, for stores specifically. But what do you think will happen to all of these people who got into the game at $65 a box and now boxes cost $100 or $120? So to me, those are players that a lot of them might actually leave if supply is ever get fixed. It's like, wait, I got into the game and it was ultra cheap at $65. Why do I have to pay $120 for a set 6 box or a set 7 box? That didn't make any sense, right? Now, I know people are already typing out excuses, right? I already saw it, which is, this data is faulty. It doesn't matter. Like, this is not a statistical analysis, all right? Although 700, a sample size of 770 people is actually pretty decent. Now, there are many reasons why players might not be joining the game, right? Maybe communities are dying because the stores suck. Maybe the communities are dying because of this or that or whatever. There are lots of different reasons. I'm not trying to prove why people are leaving. What I'm trying to say is there is no evidence for the initial claim that the positive effects of getting people to play in open packs far outweighs the negatives of card population. That is why I made this poll. Now, this was a super long-winded, all over the place video to explain that low box prices and singles is generally very bad for the game. All right. I've been yelling for far too long now, but there is one last note that I just need to get off my chest. I don't really know if anyone made it this far. All right. If you did make it this far, leave me a comment that says, I read your note. Okay. I read your note. This is one last note, which is you might not agree. That's fine. I just want people to be more educated about the realities of TCGs. All right. These response to a response videos happen because I just see these blatantly wrong opinions. They're not even opinions because the rotation one I made is literally facts, but I just am trying to educate more people about the realities of TCGs. Like, I get it, right? Star Wars is new. You love the game. You love the IP. You love this new community that you're a part of. You love this new obsession. You want it to succeed. You don't want to feel bad. You don't want to think about negative things. I get that, okay? But you can love something and still acknowledge its failures. You can question their decisions. New fandoms always have a problem with toxic positivity in the beginning. And Star Wars has some insane toxic positivity. When you go to comments, when you go to any discussion place, if you say anything negative, there's going to be 4 or 5 people that come out and will be like, nothing's FFG has done is wrong. How dare you say that? Blah, blah, blah. It's like, if you ever talk to somebody and they say, oh, there's no problems at all. Toxic positivity. It is bad for a game. Now, there is also toxic negativity, which some people say that I am, but I feel like anytime I have an opinion, I try to back it up with this, this, and this, and this. I try to use examples, and honestly, I'm fine being wrong. I say this in a lot of videos, and I say this in a lot of times where I talk, which is clip it and ship it. All right, clip it, and in 6 months, if I'm wrong, I will say I'm wrong. But I don't think the opposite happens. So I just want to say, when you are part of a Discord, when you're in Facebook, maybe it's you, maybe it's the person talking next to you, but you really need to watch out for all of this toxic positivity, because I guarantee you, I promise you, whether it's a video game, whether it's a new TV show Reddit that you're in, whether it's a Star Wars Unlimited, communities die because the toxic positive people overrun it. And you know what happens? Usually they'll splinter off and there'll be another subreddit or another Discord that's filled with a bunch of negativity, and that turns into toxic negativity, right? That's not good either. This is not super related to this video. I think it is much more to do with the comments and things that I've seen all over the place. But it's okay to be like, yeah, it really does suck that supply is really low. Hopefully, a couple of new players will come in and they'll help balance things out. Ta-da! Like, I think that's a reasonable take. I still think you're wrong, but I think that's a reasonable take and a reasonable hope. But when you say that the positives of oversupply far out exceed the negatives, that is just not true, never been true, never will be true. Like, I don't know this. I don't know what to say. All right. Okay. All right, that last comment is pretty much what I just said. I don't know how long this will be, because I will have to edit it pretty heavily, but I do appreciate everybody. I think this will be the last Star Wars video until the set actually comes out and we see some of the cool things, fun things, or potentially bad things. I believe a lot of stores are probably going to receive their boxes next week, which means showcases are going to start being leaked, prestige cards are going to be leaked. We're going to start seeing the hit rates in those Carbonite boxes, so you might see a video about that next week. And until then, I think you should hope that they fix the supply. All right? I'll see you in the next one. Bye.